Great. Hi, everyone, and welcome. Lovely to have you join us. We're just going to wait for everyone to join us. I can see the numbers creeping up. If you want to let us know in the chat who you are and where you're dialing in from, and if you're an intern or you're a uni student or a school student, let us know in the chat. It'll be lovely to hear from you where you are. My name's Josie and I'm Chief Executive of Creative Access, and I will do a formal introduction in 2 minutes. I can see the numbers coming up. So yeah, like I said, let us know who you are and where you are, because we'd love to hear from you. And we will be live tweeting and Instagramming throughout, so you can see our hashtags on the presentation screen at the moment, as you can see. So I'm going to kick off. Welcome to all of you. If this is your very first Creative Access Masterclass, we always enjoy having these, and this is a particularly special one for us because it's with our partners and friends at McLaren Racing. So I hope we've got some F1 fans among us. Like I said, I'm Josie and I'm one of the founders of Creative Access. And this is one of my favourite parts of my job because I get to hear about all these amazing organisations and roles within the creative industries, and I hope you will appreciate it. I know lots of you have submitted questions in advance, and thank you for those. We'll do our best to cover as many as possible of them. And you can also submit questions via the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. So not on the chat, but on the Q&A function. And we will do our best to answer as many as we can throughout the workshop. I think that's all the formal proceedings for now. I'm going to pass on to our amazing panel. Now, some of you will have heard before, just by introduction, if you follow us well, you will know that this year is a very special year for us because not only is it our 10th anniversary, but we were also able to launch a career development bursary for people within our community. Now, this is quite a landbreaking event for us, because a landmark event for us, groundbreaking, because we've done some research and we know that within our community, almost over 70% of individuals are facing financial obstacles to either entering or progressing in their careers. So this bursary that we've put together with the support of McLaren is to enable people who are looking to either enter or progress in the creative industry, seek funding of up to £1,000 for things like computer equipment or festival submissions or driving lessons, or all sorts of different things. There's lots of criteria. We will be launching this again at the end of summer, again with McLaren support, so keep an eye out for that. But other than that, we also have a really wholehearted partnership with McLaren in that we're doing some summer internships, which you'll hear more about shortly. We're running a mentoring program, which we hope many of you will apply to. And we're doing some training with the team there. So I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to pass on to the speakers who've really what you've come to hear about. And I'm going to ask each of you in turn to please just give us a quick introduction as to who you are and what your role is. And then we will move over to the questions that you've all submitted. So thank you for joining us, and I'm going to start off with Simon.
Okay, cool. I'm Simon Didley. I'm a senior specialist in McLaren Racing's brand and creative team. We, across like all of our series, we cover car livery, trucks, garage, 3D animation, overarching brand guidelines, and pretty much everything in between. Basically everything that needs our brand applied to it visually usually comes through our in-house studio. In the team, I specialize in car livery and branding, mainly focusing on Formula One, but supporting the other series as well. So that's me.
Great, thank you very much. And Caroline.
I'm Caroline and I'm head of marketing and merchandise for McLaren Racing. So similar to Simon, cover all of the racing series that we work in. So that's Formula One, IndyCar, Extreme E, and then any other series that we'll look to move into. And I work across all licensed partnerships. So that's everything from New Era caps, t-shirts, hoodies, etc., through to electric bikes, watches, luggage, and NFTs. Work very closely with the creative team, the fan team, how we segment our audience and target sort of global fan base to return revenue and brand exposure for us and for our listeners.
Really fascinating. I'm going to be asking you a lot more about that. Callum, over to you for a quick intro.
Thank you, and hi everyone. So yeah, I'm Callum Wilcox. I'm a senior specialist of fan and brand strategy. So my role is primarily focused on partnership development within Formula One, IndyCar, and most recently Extreme E. So I pull together all of the pitches and proposals, creating partnership positions between sponsors, essentially who we're targeting at McLaren, and then essentially pull that all together to try and get as many partners as possible across our racing platforms.
So give us an example of some of the partners that you work with.
So primarily it's partnership development.
Yeah.
So it will be going after new sponsors. So some recent sponsors which we have just signed would be Google, which was a brilliant partnership for us. So they span across our Formula One team, our Extreme E team, as well as integration of all their kind of products and services across our racing platforms to enable us to essentially go racing. So that's a particularly good partnership that we've just signed.
Excellent, lovely. So look, my next question is kind of one for all of you. How did you get into your particular roles? Because some of you are doing quite niche roles at the moment. You know, we think of marketing, but actually you're quite a specific part in the kind of marketing communications arena. So did you go to, quick hands up from the three of you, did you go to university, all of you? Yeah. What, Simon, I'll go back to you. Simon, what did you study, and did you kind of dream, like, what did you have a life plan to start off with, and how did you end up where you are?
You're on mute, Simon.
I studied a Bachelor of Design with honours, and initially something that I always remember when I was in college, I went to my career advisor and told him that I wanted to design cars, and he told me to pick something more realistic, which I always find a little bit sort of interesting, because like you never know what sort of path that you'll take. After that I didn't necessarily plan on coming in and designing Formula One cars or liveries for Formula One cars, but it's sort of it was a little bit of a roundabout journey to get here.
Give us a whistle stop tour of that journey.
Oh, so well, I came over from New Zealand pretty much on holiday. So once I was here, I stayed, and then I just started passing my CV around. Didn't have any prior experience in the creative industry. But I had my CV all sort of my personal work, and I just passed that around. Ended up working for this sort of very small creative agency that gave me a chance, and it was very small. It was 2 people, including me. We were in the creative, we were in the education sector, so working with universities and stuff like that. And one day McLaren came along and gave us one job to do, doing presentations. 2 jobs, 3 jobs, 4 jobs, and ended up just basically being our full-time job until they hired us both on. And so we sort of came in a little bit of a roundabout way. You're on mute there.
You'd think I'd learn by now, wouldn't you? At least I'm not the only one. But I was saying, so you kind of did it by stealth, basically by doing a really good job.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, they can't get rid of us now.
Callum, how about you? What was your journey? What did you study?
Are you talking to me or Caroline there? Sorry.
Callum.
Oh, so I originally studied economics at Manchester University, and I really enjoyed the marketing modules within that. So then I went on to study a master's in marketing again at Manchester University. And the way that I kind of got into McLaren was I wrote my dissertation on sponsorship activation within, social media activation within sponsorship. So I had written like a 120-page dissertation on this, and I put that on my CV. And one day I got an email from a recruiter saying, an iconic British brand based in Woking are interested in interviewing you. And I kind of guessed that it might have been McLaren. So yeah, I kind of knew that I really enjoyed sports sponsorship, and I had focused on that at university. And yeah, ended up landing a role at McLaren.
Wow, dream job for you then.
Yeah, something like that.
Perfect. Caroline, how about you? How did you end up at McLaren?
Where I'm at. So I studied retail management at university, and within that I had a placement year, which I I actually did at Harrods, which was brilliant to work out what areas I wanted to go into and what areas I didn't want to go in, particularly across sort of retail buying and merchandising. So that was my sort of route in. I worked for a number of British retail brands, specifically on menswear. And then I got bored of the same thing day in, day out. Love buying, love products, but it was the sort of monotony that you knew, spring, summer, autumn, winter, this is always going to happen. So I had a bit of time out. When I came back, thought I wanted to keep working on products, but move into a new area. So did the Olympics, and then I got a job with Puma. And within Puma, the sports company, I was working specifically on sports licensing. So, huge company, they do it extremely well and really sort of still product focused, but really looking at how you as a brand within Puma can work with other brands and assets to extend their reach, revenue, and how they target global audiences and the importance of those brand alignments. So absolutely loved that. I worked across all the Formula One assets, football teams, etc. And then I thought I really want to work for a team. So fortunately, position came up with McLaren, and I transitioned over about 5 years ago. So yeah.
Brilliant. So Caroline, continue with you. The perception of Formula One is still very much a man's world. How does it feel to be a woman working at in your world?
It's interesting because obviously within marketing, I think we've definitely got a percentage of females. You might have within the sort of engineering sort of part of the business. I think I don't know whether I've just been in it for so long that you don't really sort of pay attention as much. It's definitely changed over the last sort of, I've been at McLaren for 5 years, Puma over the last 7 years. It's definitely changed. And I think we're fortunate in McLaren because it is a very inclusive working environment. So personally, I actually haven't found too many challenges other than you do get the, you have to do your homework. I think when you kind of work for a company or in sports generally, you realise, you kind of got to do your homework. You need to understand, you need to hold a conversation with the engineers or the mechanics or, the technical directors. But also, so you definitely go digging, do your homework and listen to the experience of other people. But I would say, it's definitely progressed over the last 7 years.
It's interesting because, listening to you, you've obviously worked for lots of different brands, whereas Callum and Simon have been, or Simon, I guess, for the agency, you might have worked on more. But, we're quite used to working with lots of agencies that kind of chop and change. But when you're in-house, not just at McLaren or anywhere, like how important is it to love the brand or the product that you're working for? Or do you think actually skills are skills, like just generally? I don't know Simon, do you want to give that a shot?
Sure. I think it is very important, but I don't think it's not a necessity. You can get by without it, but it definitely helps to have an interest in Formula One. Personally, I watch all the races. I listen to podcasts and stuff like that, which is interesting because I can probably have more info than them. But it's very. I think it definitely helps you be passionate about the job.
I think that they're trying to embed kind of an agency culture within McLaren. So lots of people which they've hired recently have all come from agency backgrounds. And I think that brings in a new way of thinking into a business, which has historically been people who are staying there for a long time. They've been in-house for a long time. So it just brings fresh perspectives and fresh ideas. And that's something that I've seen change over the past 5 years that I've been here.
That's great to hear. Cast your minds back to when you were starting out in your career. We've got a couple of good questions here. Valentina's asked us, what advice do you wish you were given when you were starting out in your career?
I would say don't be afraid of mistakes, because I think that's one of the ways that you learn. That's one of the ways you progress. And I think when you're initially starting in this sort of sector, it can be sort of a bit of a fear to make mistakes in this sort of, but I think that's how you'll progress. I think maybe if you're getting into the design side from my point of view, maybe immerse yourself in it. So like search out blogs, award-winning design agencies, new agencies, etc. Keep yourself up to date with current trends that spark your inspiration, and whatever jobs come your way should hopefully sort of, you'll always be ready to tackle them.
That's really good advice. And actually, we're going to come back to that because we've got lots of questions about internships and how people can actually apply, which we'll come back to afterwards. Caroline, how about you? You've just graduated. What would you love to tell yourself?
I would say I agree with Simon. The big one is just don't be afraid of mistakes, and actually sort of have an opinion. It's good to have a voice. It's good to share ideas, ask questions, and form your own opinion, and put that forward. Don't be shy.
Perfect. Right, Callum, I'll come back to you in a bit. I want to spend a bit of time now talking about your actual roles, because I think the thing about marketing is that people I think that it's quite a mystery to many people. There's so many different aspects and elements, and actually even between the three of you, your roles are really quite different, even though you might be in the overarching team. So obviously you have your specific roles, but could you tell us a little bit more, each of you, about your day-to-day jobs and the other roles that you interact with, just so that people get a sense of the breadth of opportunity available within one particular department? So Callum, do you want to just kick off? You've spoken to us a bit about partnerships. Yeah. What does that mean in practice? And who else within your team do you work with?
So I'm actually transitioning at the moment into a new role, which is going to be focused around Extreme E, which we've just entered into. So my role historically has been focused on partnership development and bringing in new revenue, but something that McLaren is very good at is giving opportunities internally. So with my experience across partnership development, I am now going to apply that into actually managing current partners as well. And then also looking after the kind of long-term strategy of how can we engage new fans and which brand should we go after in a data-driven way. Stuff like that. So I think McLaren is great at giving opportunities for progression, and it's great to learn about different elements within marketing as well, so within partnership development.
Can you give me an example, Callum, of what your day looks like in practice? Like, how does that, like, what are you actually doing on an hour-to-hour basis in your job?
So my current role involves lots of creating of pitches and proposals. So I will essentially come up with a narrative of how a partnership could work, and different storytelling ideas for what we believe would be the best idea for this particular partner. So I would work then very closely with Simon and his team to create these proposals, usually within InDesign, and then they would be pitched or presented to prospects and to partners. So that's a core element of my role. And then on top of that, it would be managing existing partners, so checking in with them on a daily basis, planning events, planning driver appearances, and a number of assets which we have available to us that we can use to activate their partnerships. So that's what I would say is my core roles.
That's really helpful, thank you. Simon, so then moving on to you. So Callum briefs you, or tell us about what you, kind of the main things you do in your job and what a typical day is like.
I've got sort of two main roles, main things that I do sort of day to day. One's a race to race branding. So like we work with Aero and Surface and Brand teams to make sure the branding changes that come on race to race, which Callum obviously is a part of getting all of those new brands on the car. So he mentioned like Google recently. Then there were the wheels on there, the sort of colourful wheels that were applied to the car that had to come through us, and we had to go through Aero and make sure it didn't add in affect anything aerodynamically, it didn't add too much weight, and then had to go through Google themselves to make sure they were happy with that sort of branding sort of branding area, and that sort of applies to any one of our new partners or branding across the car. So some areas are more aero dependent than others, and it's quite interesting sort of talking to the aero department about that, because a lot of it just goes straight over your head, like it's all technical stuff, but you learn to sort of deal with that sort of side of things, and it's extremely interesting to me, at least. Then the other thing is car livery. So I work with my creative director to develop the season liveries, plus any one-off liveries that come throughout the year. Similar challenges to the sort of what I mentioned previously, like weight, aerodynamics, partner branding, all have to be considered. We also take into account wider brand fan sentiment, and our actual brand itself have to make sure that's represented properly, and the influence from the rest of the team. So there's usually a reason for whatever's put on the car. And
you must be very excited seeing something go from like on your screen to actually being on an actual car.
It's good to see. Yeah, definitely.
So thank you. So Caroline, tell us about your job. Like, what does that actually involve? And again, a typical day.
So within my team, I have people who manage existing license partnerships. And then I have a team that manage B2B sales. So that's selling merchandise to all of our sponsors, who will then use that merchandise to activate their F1 partnership in market. So that's marketing, promotions, giveaways, events, etc. And then I have part of the team who manage digital licensing, NFTs, the wonderful world of NFTs, which we entered into last year. So this is sort of segmented across the different, business units within licensing. And that team are very much managing those day-to-day relationships. So we're focusing on, with New Era, it is, for example, pushing and promoting product for sale for this year. We're in the midst of developing 2023 product design and development ahead of launching next year, and then very much looking forward to 2024 and the growth of the business, etc. So there's a team that sort of manages across that, and then myself with my boss, we're looking ahead to pipeline partnerships, so targeting new brands. Who can we partner with that's going to, put McLaren in the hands of the new gen of fans that are coming through? So moving into high street retail, moving into new category developments, etc. So we're very much focusing on brand alignment, who shares the same principles, how we're going to target the emerging fan base and emerging regional areas. And then alongside that, we're working with the creative team on building out licensing guidelines and style guides and all of the sort of fun, exciting stuff that we give to our licensees to help inform their interpretation of the McLaren brand and how they're going to apply the McLaren brand to product to then sell. And then we're working with the fan and brand engagement strategy team to make sure we're aligned on who we're targeting. And then working very closely with social and digital across our product launch campaigns. We just released our first Formula One Lego model at the beginning of the year. So, for example, we've worked with Lego to create a full-scale model at the Australian Grand Prix, and then ongoing campaigns throughout the year. And then we run our multiple sales channels such as e-commerce, trackside retail, etc. So quite a broad spectrum that really works across sort of creative direction, product development, and then again the sort of marketing of those products and the promotion of them.
So that's really interesting. So first, just a very short answer to this one, Caroline. What's the most unusual piece of merchandise you've ever created?
Oh, a crystal statue of a cheetah.
Okay.
Very strange, which was one of a series of 3, is the fastest land, sea and air.
Oh, yeah, got it. Yeah.
Statues, 50,000 euros. I think they've still got some in stock if anyone wants. Yeah, so that I have to say that's probably the strange. That was when I joined, yeah.
So you preempted a question. We're not going to go to audience questions just yet, but I did notice that Sultan Nazir has asked a question about the Lego partnership, and he said, what was your involvement with that, and what was the process like? So I thought it would be a good time to say that, seeing as you mentioned it.
So Lego, so the process for Lego, where are we now? It probably started 2 years ago. So we had worked with them previously. We re-engaged with them. And we've worked on Lego Technic with them. So the process is we engage with their product team, and we go through a number of rounds of meetings, conversations, bring ideas. Ultimately the Lego product is the car, but how can we market it, and what's the audience, who we're targeting, what's the potential return for Lego. So we go through a round of meetings with them. Then Lego, as you can imagine, have a number of processes their side, and they call them sort of gates. So they will then go through 2 gates in the process to effectively get the product signed off from their side. And then it's confirmed we're going to proceed with the product. And then it is a truly, it's an amazing process. So this was all done through COVID, lockdown, no travel. So we had their technical design team in, on their side, all done through Zoom calls, Teams calls with our technical engineering team. So we had James Key, who's our technical director, Piers, who's our build director, production directors, etc., all feeding in and sort of feeding into the design, input, feedback, etc. So the actual design and development of the car then took a further year. And then we released the product in March, which was fantastic. So yeah.
Thank you. So Casper has a question, which I'm not quite sure which one of you wants to take, but I think it's an interesting question, which was about, what do you think are going to be the main marketing channels in the next 5 years? I mean, Caroline, you mentioned NFTs, but I don't know if Simon or Callum, you've got any thoughts about what you see as, the changing landscape of the marketing world?
Yeah, I can take that one. So I think TikTok especially is a huge marketing platform, especially for the younger generation. There seems to be a need for short form content. So McLaren very recently joined TikTok, and I think we have over a million followers already. But yeah, there's a huge need for that. And I think just short form content in general is going to be the next kind of marketing tool for targeting and accessing that younger generation.
Brilliant, that's really helpful. And again, I've got a question that came in advance from Ricky about social media and how, if you don't have a massive budget, which I guess is not quite the same for McLaren because you will have a big budget, but what's the most effective way of increasing reach and following? I don't know if any of you feel confident to answer that.
That's out of my wheelhouse.
I was going to say, we don't have, I mean, we have a significant social and digital team. I would say getting cut through, so it's so crowded, it's so crowded, there's so much coming at you. I mean, I think for our team, it's definitely easy. You've got to have stand out and cut through the rest of the noise. So how do you do that? And it's funny because people always think we do have these huge budgets, which we actually don't. So our team in-house are extremely creative with what we have, the assets we have access to, and what you can do with that. So yeah, it's definitely getting cut through in those, the crowded.
That's really helpful. In fact, that leads me on to another question from Talia, which is about your most challenging part of your job, specifically at Formula One or generally. So Simon, what's yours?
I mean, I think that the most challenging part is probably one of the parts that keeps it the most interesting. It's like the nature of the sport is like ever changing. You're like in terms of my side of things, the sort of canvas of the car is constantly developing. The parts are changing. Everything else is it just comes up every week, like something's changing, and with that sort of pace as well, one week you can be working on the car, the next you can be working on, like, say, a box for a mini helmet or anything like that. Just it keeps things interesting, the amount of sort of jobs that come in.
Thanks. And how about you, Callum?
I would say working in Formula One is definitely a high pressured environment, and especially working across partnership development, because Formula One teams are so heavily reliant upon the funding that they get from sponsorship. So it's a constantly evolving, I would say, battle to try and get, you know, as many sponsors as you can and as much revenue as you can to enable the racing team to research, develop faster than any other team on the grid. So it's definitely a high pressure environment, but it's amazing because every day is different.
So we always like to ask you all about any major career mistakes that you've made, and not because we're trying to put you on the spot and risk you losing your jobs, but more because we want people to realize that we're all fallible and actually sometimes things don't go according to plan. Can any of you think of any examples when things have gone really quite wrong, and if so, how have you managed it? Or are we all keeping quiet here?
There's so many. I'm just trying to think which one.
Sorry.
Go, Simon, sorry.
I was just saying it's just made up of mistakes. Like it's a big trail. Nothing specific that's like big enough to think of off the top of my head, but I've made many.
Well,
yeah, I think you shouldn't be afraid to make mistakes, essentially. Like we've probably all made lots of, you know, big mistakes, but it's how you then deal with that and move forward and try not to make the same mistakes again. That's probably the most important thing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Callum, you went on to do a master's in marketing, but I've got a few questions from here, people saying, what happens if I haven't got a marketing degree? Is it okay? So
definitely. So I mean, there's also, you know, a load of online courses that don't necessarily cost an arm and a leg. So what I did quite recently was a mini MBA as well, and that was just essentially the marketing modules from an MBA, and that's significantly cheaper than doing a master's, and you know, it's a part-time course as well. So I would say that there's lots of opportunities for learning online, which doesn't have to cost money. It's just about having the eagerness to learn. And I think, as Simon said, having your finger on the pulse of, you know, marketing trends and just being absolutely open-eared about stuff and keen to learn, that's probably going to set you on the right path.
Yeah, I'd say on that as well, like I don't think what you study at university necessarily needs to solidify what you do for the rest of your life either, because like when I did design, I sort of specialized mostly in digital illustration and typography, and now I use 3D software. So like I just learned that on the job. So it's you're continuously developing.
yeah, that's good to hear. And you know, leads us quite nicely. Apologies for the background noise, everybody. A lot of people within our community kind of have what we would term like squiggly careers, when they kind of start in one field and move to another, but you transfer their skills. I mean, Caroline, you've talked about working in fashion and, you know, in completely different areas. Like, how easy is it to kind of shift your career and shift sectors and, you know, within I suppose the wider marketing world?
I think it's relatively easy. I think if you have a true sort of passion and an interest, and actually it's not getting so hooked up on the fact that that job has that job title and this has this title, it's really focusing on transferable skills, which I think people, like, until you actually get into a position where you've got to think about it for a job interview or something, people don't realize like how much you're picking up or how much you transfer. Are you good managing people? Are you good managing relationships, partnerships? You know, sort of where does your interest lie? My career sort of stayed in the same sort of relative path of centered around product, but it's very much shifted from sort of owned and operated to actual brand licensing, etc. So it's all relevant, and it's you know, it keeps you on your toes, it keeps you learning, and it's sort of that constant evolution. So as you do sort of progress through, you know, sort of breadth of knowledge, it is also great to look at new opportunities, etc. So, yeah.
Brilliant. So I'm going to move on to audience questions in a minute, because there's so many good questions on here. I hope we've got time to get through them. But I wanted to ask you very quickly before we finish one final question, which is coming up time and time again, which is around opportunities for students and opportunities for graduates and people who want to work in either F1 or at McLaren more broadly. How do people go around seeking them, and what's going on?
So I know that you guys, Creative Access, are offering an internship opportunity at McLaren over the summer, which is more than one, which is going to be around 3 months. So I think everyone listening in, make sure you're checking the website, and you never know, you could end up being an intern at McLaren.
Excellent. And I think, I believe there's a page where you can register your interest as well on the McLaren site if people want to check that, so we can circulate details of that afterwards. And I would say, as with all these things, follow people on Twitter, head to sites. Creative Access, we've always got opportunities, but I guess if you're following trade press and you're following influencers in that area, then they'll be able to advise.
Yeah. And also just sign up. You can normally just sign up for job notifications as well. I think that's true on McLaren as well. So you'll get push notifications as well that should be detailed in there.
Perfect, thank you. So I'm going to move on to audience questions, because we've got literally many, and there's some really fantastic ones. But I like this first one because a lot of us will be. Our views on the world of Formula One will be highly influenced by Drive to Survive, which you won't be surprised to hear. And I know, Simon, you spoke about listening to podcasts, but what is your view on the portrayal of McLaren and other brands on that?
Well, it's sometimes a little bit sketchy. I mean, it's a good thing, like in terms of like creating that drama and a sort of spectacle to get new fans in. But I know if you're sort of really delving into it, if they're taking sort of like say one bit of speech from one race and putting it onto another, then a little bit sketchy in terms of that.
Isn't it? Yeah, that's definitely editing.
Creative license.
Absolutely. So there's a really interesting question here. We've kind of touched on it a little bit about women in sport, but also more generally broader diversity. Do you know what steps McLaren's taken to improve diversity, both ethnicity, social mobility, but specifically women?
We so over the last, I'd say 3 years, it's been an absolute sort of front and center with regard to our people team and approach to that. So there's a number of internal, I'd say, sort of processes or just standards that have been put in. Really, a big thing the business has focused on is gender gap pay. And there's a report that's actually issued to the whole business annually, I believe it is, which reports on that openly and honestly, and it shows the progress that has been made in any gender pay gaps that have been there. We are definitely seeing more across McLaren as a business, we're seeing more females in director or senior exec management roles. CMO Claire Cronin joined us from Virgin Atlantic. I think our CFO, etc. And then from a recruitment perspective, there is absolutely a focus on bringing diversity, be that race, gender, etc., through the whole business. There are specific, it's targeted, it's measured, and it's like I say, definitely front and center of our.
Yeah, I can say from our perspective, I know that we've been part of an amazing collaboration with Women in Engineering and other groups to really spearhead a change to the industry in general. So, and McLaren's been at the forefront of that. Yeah. So, question for you, Simon, from Sylvia, which is about specifically, how did you turn the challenge of being an international candidate into an opportunity to get the job? And, can I suppose he might have an agenda here, but how easy can one get a visa through sponsorship?
Well, visa through sponsorship. So I had I didn't get sponsorship while I was over here. I had ancestry, so I could remain for 5 years or so, and then after I'd been there for 5 years, I got not citizenship. I got indefinite leave to remain. So it's an entire process, but that's the sort of that's the way that I went through it, rather than sponsorship.
Okay, thank you. So look, you've touched on the pandemic, and and how you were having lots of Zoom meetings, as we all were. But how has that, there's a question here from Carl about what changes has McLaren specifically had to adapt to and have learned in terms of business post-pandemic?
To be honest, I think we've got very good at communicating, and everyone's kind of very trusted now to be working from home, which is definitely a shift in perceptions. In the past, there was more of a you need to be at your desk to complete your work properly, whereas the pandemic has brought across a new wave of, you know, as long as you get your work completed to a good level, then people are given that more flexibility and work-life balance. So I think that's something that COVID has brought, but I would say as well that actually meeting people face to face and, you know, chatting to them in person is a lot better for communication and for getting things done. So I think having a balance of working from home and being in the office has definitely helped us as a business. Yeah, that's what I would say on that one.
Yeah, flexible working is great.
Sorry, what was that, Simon?
Flexible working is great. Like it's sort of the best of both worlds, because you get to bounce ideas off people, but also like you can sleep in an hour in the morning if you want.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. There's no substitute for seeing people in person, although it's great to have that hybrid. So I've got a really interesting question here from Nassimil. How much do you guys rely on data when you're proposing new ideas, strategies, and forming partnerships?
Yeah, a lot. So we've got existing relationships with Nielsen. So they measure all of our broadcast and digital exposure. So when we're essentially pitching new prospects, we will give all of that data to them. On top of that, we have relationships with GWI, and that measures our kind of fan insights as well. So we definitely rely heavy on data. And also when we're kind of looking and strategizing at different markets which we should be targeting as a business, that data is very important for us as well, because one thing that we've decided to do is essentially try and become America's favorite racing team. And that's built off the data of, you know, America is a huge market and they have huge spending potential, and they're not necessarily fans of Formula One and motorsport. So how can we kind of aim to monetize and make these fans McLaren fans over anyone else? So it's definitely a huge part of definitely my role. And I think that gets spread out across the entire business.
That's very helpful. I'm interested in delving a little deeper into that, because we talk about fan insights. Like, what sort of feedback do you get from your fans? Like, how specific is it? And how much can a fan actually influence an outcome?
A lot. So we do surveys through Nielsen with our fans, asking them questions on anything to do with delivery, whether they, you know, like the delivery that we did and what we could improve on, all the way to merchandise with Caroline's team. What kind of merchandise would they like to see? That also stretches across to partnerships as well. So who do you think would be a good partner for McLaren, and why do you think that? So we definitely listen to our fans as much as we can. And something which we're actually introducing this year is called VODbox. So where some of our members of our team would go down to the track and interview people in person and ask them, you know, what's your favorite thing about McLaren, or what could McLaren be doing better in comparison to other teams? And then we will take that data and try and apply it internally.
That's great. Glad to hear that people can make a difference. Caroline, Fatima has a question for you, asking, how do you pick the brands that you work with?
So once we've looked at categories, etc., and where we want to go, again, it's looking at, okay, what are our markets? What's our target audience? Where do we feel we're going to get the best return? And by that, it's not, it's looking at what brand alignment is going to come across. It needs to be authentic. The fans have to kind of, you know, buy into it, understand it. And it's not just sort of random partnerships that don't make sense. So we'll go through a whole process. We're actually looking at female brands specifically at the moment. It's a big piece for us. People don't realise, but I think the female F1 audience is actually about 40% of the total audience. So it's significant. Within the US specifically, it's huge and growing. And one thing we recognise is that female fans are massively underserved, massively within the sport. So we'll then go through and look at, okay, female audience growth is actually 25 and under. So what are the relevant brands for that audience? Where we're going to show up, and it's going to be authentic, it's going to resonate with them, and we're going to give them something they're going to want to buy into. So we look at, you know, how can we work with brands that are in ASOS or Urban Outfitters, or what's the, you know, new American brands that are upcoming who might want to sync and do partnerships. But yeah, so it's very much, it's understanding the growth of the audience who you want to target. It's working with the team that Callum was talking about, looking into research into brands that tap into that audience. And then we basically look to connect, have conversations, and we normally start with about 15, and then we end up filtering down to one that we'll go forward with.
That's great. Thank you, Caroline. Laura's asked a nice question, which is, do any of the drivers get a say in any of the marketing?
To a certain extent.
Yeah, to a certain extent.
I mean,
social media channels, I would say, but they have contracts, and within those contracts, they have a certain amount of time that they need to give to us in marketing, and a certain amount of appearances that they need to do per year. So I would say that, you know, they're contractually obligated to do those appearances, and I'm not probably not authorized to say.
Well, let's leave that there. So look, I am just moving on. There's another question there, which is really sort of slightly related from Carl, which is, he was obviously a super fan here, who's saying that the throwback golf livery for Monaco was amazing. And how much do you thought goes into the archive brand history when you're creating one of the livery for certain tracks or locations?
So that was my creative director and I. So it's a quite a big process. So like we basically started designing that one in sort of November, December the previous year. And we went through the entire process of like researching all of the previous golf liveries, researching our specific golf liveries, the McLaren ones, and then whether we go in a historic sort of direction, or if we go in a more modern direction. So we actually designed probably about 50 different liveries that were sort of gradually got narrowed down. And then there were two sort of that were came out up top, and then the final one, which was produced, which seemed to be a little bit of a throwback, but also had some modern bits in there as well.
You because you talked about the like how much fans can influence things, so the thought process behind that was probably kicked off the previous June when we announced the golf partnership. And it was one that we had back in the 60s, and we came back together, and you can imagine the fans were so excited. Yeah. A lot of them were designing their own golf liveries, and that sort of triggered the thought process behind it. So the sort of fan influence, the fan voice is significant.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
That's great, thank you. So I'm just trying to, there's so many questions here that I'm just kind of getting slightly, okay. So I'm going to bring it back a little bit to rather than delving specifically into the brand, but into what you as employers. So I assume all of you at some point bringing people onto your teams, what are the sort of skills that you look for in people who are applying for a role? There's a particular question here from Shania. What would you, if you were interviewing somebody that's just new to the workforce, what would you want to see in them?
I think an eagerness to learn and improve would be the main thing. I mean, in terms of my development while I've been at McLaren, I started out sort of designing stationery and then presentations, and gradually worked my way up to this sort of. So it's definitely an eagerness to learn new things.
And I think you have to get on with them as well as a person, because you work with them so closely day in, day out. And so, you know, there's definitely a huge factor as well, how they get on with people within the team, how they interact. So I think that's a big factor as well.
Thank you. Caroline, you might want to ask this. Why might someone not think a career at McLaren's for them, and how would you persuade them to come and work for you?
That's a good question.
I think maybe it goes around some of the stereotypes that actually, like you talked about, actually 40% of your audience are women.
Yeah, I think if you think, it's Formula One, I don't really know much about Formula One, I'm not a petrol head, if it's sort of around that and interest in sport, etc. I think it's just understanding that there is so much more than that as a brand, as a relevance, to I guess it's sort of brand new growing audience across the sport. Or if you think it's a bit stuffy or very sort of engineering and sort of mechanical focus, it's actually, I think, just taking the time to understand that it's absolutely not. But also I would say, like, the importance is, big companies such as ours, we need that new talent coming through, because you need people who know the trends, understand what their counterparts and their friends are all into at 17, 18, 19, 20, whatever it is, and keep it sort of relevant, because that is one of the biggest challenges, that you've got to stay on top of things. So that younger the younger experience, etc., coming through is really relevant. And actually, sometimes it's a nice challenge to come in and sort of shake things up a bit, if things.
Absolutely. I think you're spot on.
Yeah.
I mean, you're absolutely right, Caroline. Like, people, you have to recognize your own value, and actually you as an organization have a responsibility to reflect your audiences. So somebody who's from a different background or who's a different generation is really valuable.
Yeah, and I think actually that's what we want, is people who actually will come in and go, they won't just slip into the mold and be, yes, people know people. It's like actually just bringing a different opinion, a different view. And if it sometimes it's better, if you're not an F1 fan, you won't be so, you'll have a different view on maybe what we do as a business. You're not so emotionally tied to.
Probably question more things as well. Just be like, why are we doing this? And then you're like, why are we doing that?
Because we've always done it like that. That's not, and
it is honestly the number of new people who are joining. My boss, actually joined from the NFL. She went into esports and gaming, and when she joined, she said, all I know about Formula One is Drive to Survive. So you don't have that experience or knowledge of the sport. It's more skill set and just passion that you can bring.
Brilliant.
But then it's very hard not to become a McLaren fan once you're in the business.
Well, that leads on. Yeah, I was going to ask you, actually, I've got a nice question here, which is, what are the perks of working at McLaren, or in marketing more generally?
From a corporate perspective, there's obviously all the general benefits that the employee gives, but general benefit, I mean, you don't get a car discount. That's the first thing. You don't get to borrow the cars, you don't get to do any of that. But there's opportunities for travel. Probably the biggest within the marketing department, I'd say that's probably one of the biggest.
The opportunities to move roles once you're in the team.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a focus that progression doesn't necessarily just mean going up or vertical. It's about transfer. Again, we have a number of people who move from hospitality to partnerships management, from across the board. So that's definitely encourage. We always, to be honest, there's always a bit of a focus on trying to recruit internally before things go externally, so everyone has that opportunity.
So question here, nice one from Laura. How do you stay ahead of the curve? Where do you get your inspiration from?
I think this sort of goes back to one of the points that I mentioned earlier, which was the just checking out basically all of the trends, like all of the top sort of agencies, on my side at least, agencies and stuff like that, and just seeing what's coming through, and using that as sort of inspiration. Something will spark, and then just hopefully that'll keep you ahead of the game. And then Callum's providing the data and everything, so to hopefully back it up.
Yeah, it's just about keeping your finger on the pulse, I think, of all marketing trends, and looking into partnerships that have gone on globally, and kind of getting some inspiration from that. And I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I read Marketing Week and Campaign, and just generally trying to keep my finger on the pulse of all things marketing.
That's really helpful. Somebody's asked you specifically actually where you did your MBA.
So I did my mini MBA through Mark Ritson. So it was an online course and it was 3 months. And I must say it was absolutely brilliant. You did kind of 10 weeks of modules. You got some associated readings, and then you had a practical exam after that. And it's kind of one of the best things I did, I think, because it's actually very practical. Whereas I think studying, you know, a master's is great, but it can be sometimes very theoretical. But using something and applying that in a day-to-day basis is very, very useful.
Brilliant, thank you. So Caroline, how do you keep yourself fresh in the role? Like, where do you get your inspiration from? We've talked a bit about social media. Do you, and another question is specifically, do you follow what your competitors are doing?
We do. Yeah, so from a competitor perspective, we do. I would say within motorsport, it's, you know, pretty same. You know, there are some cool collabs that come out, but we definitely look much broader. So football clubs, Paris Saint-Germain, you know, etc., all the kind of usual suspects. And then looking to, I mean, I'd say the sort of most forward focused sort of from a fashion perspective was a collab that we did last year with Rude, and that was very much focused on US and the mix of sport culture, lifestyle and music. So we will sort of work with our partners already in the space, see what else they're doing with, what they think is cool, how can we play into that, and then we will just, as Callum said, just keep our finger on the pulse of fashion, new brands, new trends that are coming up.
Thank you. So I've got a really nice question from Maddie, it's very specific, but I think it's a very good question, which is, what are your top 3 favorite newsletters currently that you subscribe to? So you've talked about, you said Marketing Week and Campaign, Callum. Is there another one? And the other, feel free to chip in, any of you. On just obviously, don't forget the Creative Access newsletter is the best one of them all.
There you go. That's the top 3 sorted. Yeah.
Any others that you would recommend?
They're the main 2, to be honest, that I read. I'm sure that Simon and Caroline probably read stuff which is more specific to their sectors, but I think for broad general marketing topics, Campaign and Marketing Week are definitely the go-tos.
I don't necessarily subscribe to any newsletters or anything like that, but I basically just go on a bunch of different blogs and sort of check out, say, fashion blogs, like anything sporting, anything like that, and just check out the competition that way and see what people are doing.
Great. If people want to stay in touch, is the best way to sign up via the McLaren website? Because obviously you've inspired lots of people. There's lots of conversation going on here. What's the best way for people to follow you and to sort of stay in touch? Not necessarily personally, but more broadly as, you know, McLaren.
Yeah, I would say website, social channels.
So you can sign up to McLaren Plus, which is on our website, and with that you would get priority access to all of our great content. You would get discounts on our store. I think McLaren Plus is probably the best way of doing that. And then obviously following our social channels as well. We have the McLaren Broad Racing channel. We have our IndyCar channel, our Extreme E channel, and, you know, whichever racing series we decide to enter into next.
Excellent. So, and on that, just to remind all of you that we expect to be live in the next couple of weeks. So keep coming back to the website on some 3-month summer internships, specifically within the comms and marketing team at McLaren. They are really, really amazing opportunities. They are unique and groundbreaking for the first time we've worked on something like this. So really do encourage all of you to apply because they're going to be brilliant. And as you can see, McLaren is clearly a fantastic place to work. And also, you know, well, that's my top tip for all of you. So I'm going to wrap up in just a moment, because I think we've covered most of the questions. A final kind of word from each of you, please, on why people should work in marketing and you know, any kind of final piece of advice from you, like what's the best thing about working in marketing from your perspective? It could be quite niche according to your area, or it could be broader about, you know, the whole sector.
I think as a sort of marketing, as a broader sort of space, there are just so many different opportunities there. You've got, I mean, just our sort of 3 sections here. You've got merchandise, you've got partnerships, you got brand and creative. Then there's like there's hospitality, there's sort of events. You've got communications. There's just so many different jobs that might suit you, and hopefully one of them will.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Simon. There's just such a breadth of opportunity, and you know, whatever, you know, there's, you know, any kind of brand in the world is looking for marketeers. So, you know, it really is the role to go into if you're looking for work. Callum, what's your final take home for everybody?
Just don't be afraid to throw yourself into everything. And if you generally love working in marketing, then it makes your days much easier. You have to love what you do. And I think thankfully for us, you know, we found a great career at McLaren, but don't commit to something if you don't, you know, love what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. And don't be afraid to fail and learn and grow. And that's my kind of top advice.
Thank you. And finally, last but not least, Caroline, what's your advice for everybody?
I'd probably say if it says sort of entry level sort of first moves in, you've got a great opportunity to suck up as much knowledge, experience, ask the questions, and kind of look into the sort of different departments that might be within marketing. And that just gives you the great opportunity to actually really home in on maybe what area you want to focus on. Yeah, just kind of, yeah, like Callum said, really work out where your passion lies, because it's a hell of a lot easier. You know, marketing, it's not a 9 to 5, and sports marketing, it's not 9 to 5, and it's not Monday to Friday. So you really do have to have a passion for it. But if you have that, then, you know, it's not really a job. You know, you just sort of enjoy every day and take the challenges as they come. But I was, yeah, just soak up as much as you can. And see where your sort of passion point lies.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, the 3 of you. I mean, like, we've had a, you know, unprecedented number of questions. It's been hugely popular, and I know we've got some real fans here who I know would love to get a bit more detail from you, but we've run out of time. For all of you watching, we have a totally different theme for our next masterclass, which is we're going to be focusing on your mental health and well-being. We know that over 70% of people in our community have struggled with their mental health over the last couple of years, in particular as a result of the pandemic and other global events. And it's not straightforward. And we've got a really amazing panel of speakers lined up. So we'll be talking about ways to support people, top tips. And so it's going to be a really interesting conversation. Please do join us. You can see the details on our website. So thank you all again, Simon, Caroline and Callum. You've been absolutely brilliant. We know that some lucky people will hopefully get to work with you in the summer, and we're very grateful to you. And thank you all for tuning in, for watching, everybody, and have a lovely rest of your evening. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Guys. Bye-bye.